Shabbat Shalom. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. The New Colossus by Emma Lazarus. Let all who are hungry come and eat, we say at our Passover Seder. And as our sages teach in our Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, hospitality to wayfarers is greater than welcoming the divine presence. Parashat Vayera is a manual of Hachnasat Orchim, the deeply held Jewish desert value of welcoming the guests, of hospitality. I am often amazed at how so often those who have the most have the highest barriers built to where their bounty rests. And like the artful dodger in Oliver, yes, of dubious moral background, needless to say, when little artful dodger sings, "Consider yourself at home. Consider yourself part of the family. There isn't a lot to spare. Who cares? Whatever we've got, we'll share." It's a little prescription that I have hanging in my house that starts with, "For a trim figure, share your food with those who don't have any." It's good advice. This parsha is suffused with examples of hospitality and the lack thereof. Sometimes extended or not extended by exactly the same people. It's not an either or, an only and. There are times when very real human beings find themselves able to receive the other and share what they have, and other times when their doors and hearts slam shut. Same folks. The Torah knows people. Just a few of the very many examples in this incredible parsha. Please read the whole thing if you have time this afternoon. We begin with Abraham and Sarah, by extension, showing gracious, expansive hospitality to three men who visit them. Even as Abraham is recovering from a very dramatic, very late in life surgery, his self-circumcision, he nonetheless bows and gets up in the heat of the day to greet three passerbys who are in the desert, and we soon find that they are revealed to be divine visitors. His nephew, Lot, houses the same divine messengers in Sodom, But the townspeople show the antithesis of hospitality, demanding that Lot produce those guests to be brutally defiled. He doesn't do that. He makes a terrible offer of his virgin daughters, which they also don't take him up upon. But the fate of the cities is sealed. As Sodom and Gomorrah burn, Lot's wife looks back and famously turns to a pillar of salt. There are so many interpretations of why she turns to a pillar of salt, but one of them suggests that she was an ungracious hostess, stingy with seasonings. Cursed forever, Mrs. Lot is to be a pillar of salt. The strange episode of Sarah, this is much all earlier in the Parsha from where we read today. She enters King Abimelech's palace. That's a very twisted notion of hospitality, where women were often taken in to the harems of ancient rulers. A plague of barrenness descends on the royal household as a result, which is a situation rectified only after Abimelech invites Abraham hospitably to settle wherever you please, Abraham, in Abimelech's land. And when we catch up with them later, they establish the covenant or the pact that results in the area known still to this day as Beersheba. And at the grand weaning party for Isaac, which likely featured a wide guest list and lavish preparations, the epitome of hospitality in the desert, of course, we know that the celebration ends abruptly and painfully when Sarah, who is offended by Ishmael's laughter, throws him and his mother Hagar out of Abraham's house forever. And we live to this very day with the fallout from that ancient household rupture. Vayera's theme of hospitality overflowed into that enormous haftarah. There, the value of receiving guests is actually even more explicit. If you noticed, the Shunammite woman offered Elisha the prophet a meal every time he came to town. And once she said to her husband, "I am sure this is a holy man of God who comes this way regularly. Let us make a small enclosed upper chamber and place a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand there for him so that he can stop there whenever he comes to us." A permanent Airbnb for Elisha when he visits the Shunammite woman. This is all valuing and demonstrating what good can come from hospitality and what ill can come when it is withheld. In the very famous opening section of Vayera, chapter 18, Abraham is sitting in his tent at the heat of the day. God appears to him. He looks up. He sees 3 men coming. He rushes to greet them. And after he offers modestly a little bit of water and bread, he and Sarah prepare for them, or really Sarah and the servant, prepare for them a lavish feast. And when the feast is given to these 3 strangers, Abraham stands over them as they recline, likely leaning on one elbow, as is the Bedouin desert custom. They recline and the host stands, not to lord over them, because he calls them my lords, but actually in the posture of desert hospitality. The host does not eat until the guests are fully satisfied. And in a lovely interpretation, it is noticed that when Abraham stands, it is as though the Torah is telling us when we provide proper and expansive hospitality, we rise even higher than the level of the angels. In another beautiful section in this early part of our Parsha, after they have prophesied that Sarah will give birth to a child in a year's time, they seem to know a lot about the family, don't they? They are hardly strangers. But when they leave, in verse 22, the men go on from there to Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Actually, that is not the verse I want. I want verse 16. Forgive me. A little earlier. The men set out from there and looked down towards Sodom. Abraham walked with them to see them off. I have such sweet memories. My childhood bedroom in my parents' home is above the stairwell, and it echoes a lot. And a very sweet memory I always hold on to, and I know I've shared it with you before, forgive me, but is listening to my parents speak to our guests as if to say, we don't want you to go. And it would echo quite wonderfully right under my room, because I had already been, I guess, sent to bed. I was young enough for that. But it was such a comforting sound to hear them lingering with guests, laughing and chatting until late into the evening. Maimonides notes the value of that kind of behavior. It wasn't just in the 1970s in the Richmond district. Maimonides himself said that's a highly valuable act, to do as Abraham did, to accompany the guests as far as possible. And that not to do so, Maimonides could be rather hyperbolic, but said to not do so is akin to murder. To not accompany your guests was to send them out into the night where anything could happen to them. So you wanted to take them as far as you could go so that you could ensure their safety. But also, from the standpoint of the Torah's value of not shaming somebody, to go with guests as far as you possibly could, even to the city limits, was to say, I value your company. You have not been an imposition on my home and my hearth and my food and my time. I want to be with you, even if they had been total strangers. Hospitality will be the theme of our week. On Thursday, for those who can come to our Nosh and Learn, we're going to have some discussion time to share with one another times that you have felt good being able to be a host, being able to be a guest, what makes a good host, a good guest, and maybe share some times when you didn't feel as welcome as you might have, or maybe where you didn't extend hospitality and it weighs on you a little bit. This is for us to consider, especially in this time when the rhetoric in our country is at such a fever pitch about who is welcome and who isn't. We really need to do some hard work, friends. The Torah exhorts us time and time and time again to give the benefit of the doubt to the stranger, to welcome them, to make them feel at home. Yes, it's a risk. The Torah knows that. It is a risk, but the risk of withholding hospitality is so much greater. Hospitality and the lack thereof was said to have led to the downfall of Jerusalem and the ancient temple. In Tractate Gittin 55 and 56, we are told that because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed. In the era of the Second Temple, the story is told, with Rome bearing down, pressing the Jewish people, and the priesthood, unfortunately, had descended into unjust behavior and corruption. Nonetheless, the rabbis tell that the temple ultimately fell because of a party that went terribly wrong. It happened this way. A certain man had a friend named Kamsa and an enemy named Bar Kamsa. The man made a party and said to his servant, "Go and bring Kamsa to the party." And the messenger went and brought Bar Kamsa, the enemy. When the host who gave the party found Bar Kamsa sitting there at the party, he said, "Hang on, see here, you are my enemy. What are you doing? Get out." Said Bar Kamsa, "I'm already here. Please let me stay. I'll pay you for whatever I eat and drink." Said the host, "Absolutely not. Get out." Said Bar Kamsa, please, may I pay for half the cost of the party? The host refused. Then, said Bar Kamsa, may I pay for the entire party? Tell you, I'll take Bar Kamsa at a party of mine any day. And yet still the host refused, grabbed him by the hand, and threw him out into the street. Said Bar Kamsa, the rabbis were sitting there, and they didn't stop him. This shows that they agreed with him. I will go and inform against them to the Roman government. Setting off a chain of further disastrous events that years later the rabbis say, it all started with Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Hospitality to wayfarers is greater than welcoming the divine presence. We might say that we have an open tent, and it does take an act of faith to open our homes, our backyards, any other private domain to strangers in need. Does our hospitality really extend to the tired, poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free, engraved there on the plaque at the feet of Lady Liberty? I'm not so sure. And there have been many times in this country's history when we know the doors to those who've needed them to be open have been absolutely shut. So I'll just leave you with this, my friends. When Abraham leaves his dealings with Abimelech, he goes and plants an ashel tree, a tamarisk tree. And a classic midrash on Abraham's ashel tree says that the letters of it, Aleph, Shin, Lamed, stand for eating, drinking, and lodging. Sort of an ancient gas, food, lodging sign. Abraham sets up either an inn or a tree or a tent where he continues his hospitable work, even in the midst of his dramatic and uprooted life. And we must do the same. No matter what is happening, it is incumbent upon us to welcome one another, to be kind to those who need it, with all of our resources shared so that we can achieve some kind of balance. Henri Nouwen was a Dutch Catholic priest, professor, writer, and theologian whose teachings on pastoral care are beloved in seminaries of multiple religious traditions. On the subject of welcoming the other, he wrote, "Hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not intended to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom not disturbed by dividing lines." Easier said than done, but let's give it a go. In places where those who wander are provided for, welcomed, hugged, sheltered, and comforted, the spirit of Abraham's ashel tree is there, as is the spirit of the divine to which he called. May our spaces be ones of transformation and growth. May they be many and blessed. Shabbat shalom.